Going to be a bit of a short video today. I just wanted to make sure and get some of this content in before Trials weekend ends. I've learned some things about this map. It was a bit of a grind. I've learned some really important things. And that is that you have to learn your own teammates as much as you have to learn the enemy when you're solo queuing. Learn what they're going to do and learn what works with that. Not necessarily just what works to counter the enemy team, but what works to complement your team. So part of Trials solo queue is calibrating to your team. Understand what your team is going to do. So one thing I'm learning is don't go right there. Don't go down into the sewer. Come over here. I like bend or portal. Look for apes over there on the right. Look for snipers over there on the left. There's going to be a lot of apes over here on the right. It works really well. Which is why if you're down there in the drain, your team's going to get aped and then you're toast. So be prepared for that. I picked this engagement. I picked that engagement and I picked it wrong. Pick for your range for your loadout. Don't mantle up onto that shrine until you've confirmed that it's clear. I don't like pushing this lane to challenge snipers because you also have to worry about apes on your left. It doesn't work and it's a race. Even if you can try and bait the snipes out, you're lucky they can toss grenades. This was a better push up here because I waited to make sure that the platform was clear before mantling. Once again, rinse, wash, repeat here. We're drilling in some muscle memory. Expect apes. Now, I'm pushing in too close for apes, by the way. I should have held back a little bit more in case there were apes. Note that this is unusual. This shouldn't all be empty. The team's a little bit overcautious at this point. The enemy team, I think that we've got them 4-1, and they're just out of ideas. So probably not a great match here in terms of useful content. Pushing from the drain can work. The issue with this push is that while it can work in theory, in paper, it doesn't work if your ally team gets aped, and your ally team's going to get aped most of the time from what I've seen. So it's better to push up to the outside along the shrine because you're better equipped to help your teammate there. Your help to your teammates. And that's really critical, especially in solo queue. I like the range here. I like the height. I like being up on the shrine after I've proven that I can step up onto it. One interesting thing about your teammates going this way is that I think that there is a natural inclination to go this way psychologically just because it's brighter, right? You're out in the sunlight. Honestly, I think there may be a psychological non-meta draw to going this route. So something to keep in mind. Definitely having more luck from the side. It's not perfect, but I'm having more luck when I push out with teammates to that side. Rinse, wash, and repeat. Now that I've got something that's giving me a win rate on it, maybe 50%, that's a basis. That's a foundation that I can build on. So my goal now here is to just iron it into muscle memory. I've got something that works. I'm getting some wins. Let's just see what we can do to improve and iterate. And I won't have it perfect probably by the end of this Trials weekend, but I wanted to get this video out as soon as I could just to sort of show what I'm learning so far. There seems to be some definite patterns emerging. Who knows, maybe they'll change by the time the weekend's over. Maybe it's different in different levels of play. Although, I'm playing a pretty good mix of diamonds and bronze players in this playlist, so who knows. Pushing all the way out there to the very, very far east side, I haven't noticed being as great. I think you want to take a little bit of an aggressive position, but don't mantle until you're ready, right? And don't waste dodges. That's something I'm learning, getting used to, is that your cooldowns don't reset between matches. So don't burn a dodge at the end of the round, right? At this point, I have it free and clear. I was able to get a couple of kills using a suspend up onto that platform, or maybe down from it, but that's something I'm still trying to get used to. Same loop here, looking for apes, coming up here to the shrine, sticking with teammates. That's all I've got for you at this point, but it seems to be working. I hope it helps you guys out. Have a most chill week end. I think I've got maybe a talking head video that I'm going to continue with. So I think that's it for like the Trials video, what I've learned this week. But if you want to stick around, I've just got some thoughts, on Trials with some content in the background. So stick around for that if you need a break. Peace out. How many games? Okay. Here's a question that I want to ask. As an average player, how many games do I have to play to go flawless? Or how many games should I expect to play? Maybe not necessarily how many games, how many sequences of games? How many cards do I have to run, assuming I'm resetting as soon as a card is invalidated, to go flawless? Right? And then obviously you can then extrapolate that to the number of total matches that you might expect to play for an average player, assuming an average player is experiencing a win rate of about 50%, which I would expect that they should. I would expect that about 50% of the time, an average player is going to meet a team that is better than them, and 50% of the time they're going to meet a team that is worse than them. Right? Now, there may be times where you meet a team that's better than you on paper, but you win, right? But that should happen about as often as you meet a team that's worse than you on paper and you lose. So you can kind of zero sum that out, right? If that's not zero sum, then you're better on paper, right? You're not at 50%. That's the idea. So in theory, and again, this is assuming no anomalies, right? So the problem is that you can't do this in a pure sense because nerves play a factor, and it may be that on average, you're an average player, except on match 7 when you know a trials card is on the table, and then you play terribly. So one thing, by the way, that might be important when playing trials is to just not worry about where you're at in the card. Just mindlessly reset as soon as you get 2 losses, and just keep working on playing every match as consistently as possible, and then let the law of numbers take effect, so that you're just kind of relaxed and you're comfortable. You don't care what game you're on, right? Am I on game 7, game 1? I don't know. I don't care. And then just make sure and check in once in a while. Oh, I have 2 losses, right? And get out. So, what are the total number? And if you think about it, it's just the simple chance of 50%, but sampled over time. So you can think of that as a chance within sequences. You have a sequence of 7, or if you have a mercy card, it's actually a sequence of 8. And, assuming it's a sequence of 7, it's a sequence of 7 that includes all wins. And how many sequences of 7 include all wins? Well, 1 out of all the possible combinations of sequences of 7, which is 2 to the 7th. So it's 1 out of 2 to the 7th. That's your odds of a card on average. And again, this is a probability. It's not a guarantee. But, statistically, your probability of getting a flawless run as an average player is 1 over 2 to the 7th. Without a mercy roll. With a mercy card, it's actually a sequence of 8 that includes a loss anywhere in that 8, as well as the flawless 8. So it's the flawless 8, but then it's also all of the sequences, all the 8 different options where there is 1 loss at any interval. Now, the interval that has a loss at the very last match is going to be indistinguishable to you from the one that goes flawless all 8 matches. But it's still a distinct sequence. It's still a distinct sequence within the set of sequences, right? So there are 8 offsets that have 1 loss, and then there's the flawless option. So that's 9 over 2 to the 8th, I believe, is your probability. And if I did that math right, 2 to the 8th, I believe, is like 255. 9 over 2 to the 8th, I just Googled it, and if I didn't type that in wrong, I believe it's about a 3.5% chance, right? And that's not for a match. That's a probability. It's not a chance. It's a probability for a sequence of 8 matches to include 1 loss or less, right? And which means it's a 3% chance for any card reset for an average player to work. So in theory, you just take that. Take 100 divided by 3.5. And you basically should have to play about 30 matches-ish, whatever. I just kind of really roughed in the match there, right? Or the math there. It's maybe a little bit less than that. I don't know. But you can think about maybe 30 matches, right? That you have to play, or not matches. Sorry, I need to be very clear here. 30 cards, 30 sequences. 30 card resets on average for an average player with a mercy card to win. And by the way, without the mercy card going flawless, assuming you're not getting another benefit from one of the other cards, right? Which I think all the cards give you some benefit. But without one of those benefits, I believe it's something like 0.78% chance, right? So you're looking at more like 128, I believe, if I remember right, matches to find a sequence. Now, importantly, this is your search space, right? You have 30 sequences, and there's a flawless match somewhere in that 30 sequences. On average, you're not going to have to search that entire space exhaustively, because as soon as you get 2 losses, you can reset the card and restart your search. So you're probably on average only going to have to search half that space. So in theory, for an average player, on average, sometimes you're going to have to run, search 30 cards plus to find your flawless match. But more often than not, you're only going to have to search, about 15 or so, 10 to 15 cards, that's entire sequences, to find your flawless match, right? For most average right, dead center, middle players. And again, this is assuming that you don't have other anomalies in play, which most of us do. So, I mean, this is probably going to be way worse for most of us, because for most of us, we're probably going to be freaking out on Game 7, which is going to make us consistently lose Game 7, right? Or Game 8, or whatever this, I guess it'd be 8 if you got a Mercy card. So, but assuming you can kind of get a mindset of just playing consistently good, as well as you can. Just keep consistency. Just keep your mechanics up and not worry about where you are in the sequence. Reset when you have to. In theory, you should be able to, after 15 resets, get your flawless card for an average player. And then the idea being that then you can reduce that time sink dramatically by obviously increasing where you are on that curve. So if you are a top 10% player, then it's 1 over 0.9 instead of 1 over 0.5 is your base there. It's 1.11, right? So you have like 1.11 repeating to the nth, which is the number of matches, right? So to the in this case we're going to say 8th. So instead of 255. So if it was 256. Sorry, I'm a computer programmer, and I often think of the max value, the max number value that you can hold, which includes 0. So there's 256 distinct values, but the maximum number, if you're including 0 in that as one of your distinct values, is 255. So I tend to always, anyway. So to the 8th, 256 values, 1 over, and you can also think of that as 1 over 0.5 to the 8th, right? So 1 over 0.9 to the 8th is only 2.32, right? It's a far lower search space. And then so that's the number of sequences in theory that you'd have to run to find a winning sequence. Because you're winning 90% of your matches. So the number of matches that include 100% wins, in a sequence, the probability of you running 2 90% chance flips where flip sequences where one of those includes wins on all of them is actually quite high. It's 1 over 2.323 something, right? So it's basically like half of your cards, right? Basically, not quite half, like maybe 20% of your cards or something like that are winning cards. And again, you don't necessarily have to exhaust that search space, so you're probably resetting your card once. If you're a top 10% player, you're probably resetting your card once per trials season, or per reset, or per flawless, right? You're resetting your card once per flawless, which is pretty crazy, right? So if you can get in the top 10% of players in trials, which isn't impossible. I mean, that's a gold tier player. I play gold tier players all the time, and I've been gold tier myself, and I don't consider myself anywhere near a pro level player. I've been gold tier in other types of matches, right? So if you can get to be a gold tier player, basically, then in theory you can get to a point where you maybe have to do 1 reset per flawless, right? 1 extra reset per flawless. So so you have your initial card, and then you may have to do 1 reset, and then you get your flawless most of the time, maybe 2, right? So that's kind of crazy. If you are a top 1% player, then you're basically you're basically never having to reset. You're basically just going flawless constantly. It's like a 1 out of 100. Well, it's like a 1 out of 10 card that you have to reset. Like 1 out of 10 of your cards you have to reset. Every other card you play just instantly goes flawless on the first try for the top 1%ers. right? On average, doesn't mean they don't ever have a bad streak, but they go flawless very easily. So that's interesting to think about, right? If you're in the top 1%, you're just gonna be going flawless like crazy. But you know, for a lot of us on the average, it's important to know that, you know, 30 card resets. I mean, that sucks. It's again, you're not going to exhaust that search space. And actually, by the way, when I said that and I reduced it by half, and I said it was like maybe 15 to 10 sequences, no, it's still 30 sequences. It's just you may not have to play all those sequences out entirely. So it's 30 times 8 would be to play out all of those sequences. So what is that? 30 times 8, because 3 times 8 is 240? Yeah, roughly 240 matches. But so it's still 30 sequences that you have to search. You're not going to reduce that. But you don't have to necessarily play all of the 240 matches because you can eliminate sequences early. So you probably only have to search on average about 120 matches. So for most of us, on average, it's 120 matches that we have to play to find our flawless card. And then again, for a top 10%er, it's like 16 matches. And again, you're not necessarily searching that whole space most of the time. It's probably 8 to 10 matches to go flawless, right? Assuming that they're, you know, having to reset their first, they're having to reset somewhere in that sequence. Again, it's on average. It doesn't mean they're never going to have to do 2 or 3 resets before they go flawless, but it's generally speaking, they're only going to have 0 to 1 resets before they go flawless. You know, with a mercy in there somewhere. So I thought that was really interesting. Is at the end of the day, it's just kind of a numbers of game, and you just want to get yourself to, you know, ideally to where that search place is less than 120. But honestly, most players can hit average just by doing a little bit of research. You can make the average pretty much for the most part, no matter what your like physical skill is. And there may be some people who it's really challenging. They may have some physical limitations where it's really hard for them to even meet the mean. I don't know, but for most players, I think you can hit the mean just by putting the dedication into learning a couple of techniques. You can be above sort of the average, and then if your technique is maybe a little bit poorer, you can compensate by just having better game sense, better knowledge of how to engage, right? And that's what I'm hoping to do on this channel, is build that game sense, so that even if you're someone who just can't execute aim well, right? You just, you know, whatever, maybe your nerves fire, you're a more nervous person, and you're just a little more jittery, and you just really struggle to land headshots every time. The hope is that with enough game sense, you can still outpace most players. Or at least, you can at least get slightly above average. And if you can get to average or slightly above average, then in theory, every trials weekend, if you can put in 120 matches, right? Or maybe that's, 60 matches every trials weekend, and then you're getting flawless every other trials weekend. Then you can get some flawless cards, right? Now that's quite a lot. I mean, that's a bit of a grind, but I would much rather put in 60 trials matches on a weekend than a single heroic patrol. I'll tell you that much. So, yeah, I think it's something that you want. I think it's reasonable. And then, by the way, if you're playing that much, your ability to execute should improve, right? So anyway, that's it, guys. Thanks for joining me for math time. It's math time. It's time for math. Peace out, guys. Have a good weekend.